So it's time to perform some just good old-fashioned general maintenance, as I always kind of preach with these things. I'm going to be doing the coolant on this. This is probably one of the most important fluids to rotaries, aside from oil, which is obvious, but coolant often goes overlooked. As it turns acidic, it actually eats your engine housings, which creates catastrophic failure. So something just as basic as a fluid change every now and then can save you from having to replace an entire engine with these or rebuild with new irons. This coolant's not quite 3 years old in this. I do it every 3 years. That's about how long general coolant's good for. I'm just doing general coolant again. In the meantime, I'm also going to be replacing the AST, which is this plastic AST here on FDs. They're known to crack and leak over time. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it will leak. So I'll be replacing that with an aluminum unit. There's several aftermarket versions you can get, or you can replace it with a factory one, which is plastic. It just becomes a maintenance item over time. In the future, I'm also going to be converting to Evans coolant once I get a new radiator and whatnot, and collect all the hoses. I'm going to replace all the cooling hoses when I restore the whole cooling system. But just for right now, I just want to keep the coolant in good condition and make sure it doesn't start eating the block. If you're not too familiar with the FD cooling system, it lays at a little more than a 45-degree angle. That is the AC condenser there, and the radiator is behind that. So it doesn't sit vertical like it does on typical cars. So because of that, you have this under tray, which most cars have as well, but on FDs and FCs, just RX7s in general, this under tray plays a huge part in the cooling system. A lot of people don't think so. They may get damaged, they may remove it, but when you look at the angle of these, so I got more light in here. When the air comes in the front bumper, it would hit that and just shoot out the bottom without that cover here. So first step to draining the cooling system is you got to pull this cover off, and we'll get that done here in a minute. Here's what the tray looks like when it's pulled out, and this is why I was mentioning this is built for this. You actually have this second tray, second level here, that hugs up against the contour of this and directs flow through the condenser and the radiator. So without this, all the air would flow and hit the condenser and drop right out the bottom of the car, and then you don't get actually much cooling, if any, going through the actual radiator and condenser. So that's why it's absolutely imperative to have an under tray here, or proper ducting aftermarket, to where you can actually force the air through the radiator and condenser. This is your radiator drain plug. You can see it's just a basic Phillips head. Mine seems to be in really good shape. You may run into them where people have just stripped these out. It's just a plastic plug, so if they use the wrong size of screwdriver, or it's kind of corroded and stuck, people really mangle these things. You can get just the plug. So if yours is questionable, I'd take a look at it. Order a plug beforehand if you know it's been kind of mangled. That way you can just replace it with a new one. They're super cheap, but that's the drain for the radiator. Once it's done draining, go ahead and put the plug back in. In addition to draining the radiator, we want to drain the block as well. You can see this little 14 millimeter bolt there in the center iron. That's the block drain for the coolant. It's really easy to get to. You can see the spark plugs up there. It's at the bottom. So let me grab a ratchet, and we're gonna loosen this and drain the block. Alright, I loosened it with the ratchet. You can see it's already starting to drip. It's kind of hard to film and do this at the same time, but give it a whirl. And for rotary, that's exactly what you want to see. A lot of times, if it's been sitting for a while, it'll come out brown and orange.
You're gonna have a bad time.
This looks nice and bright and green. But I just did this less than 3 years ago, so I know it's in good shape. But this is some pretty easy maintenance that you need to take care of on a rotary. The block drain plug uses a aluminum crush washer. This one looks like it's still in pretty good shape. Probably get another use out of this. You can still get these, they're available, super cheap, and like I said, you could usually get a few uses out of these, 3 or 4, as long as you're not hulking really crank down on these. Alright, let's talk about coolants for a minute. When I say standard coolant, I'm talking about the old school, just green stuff. It's ethylene glycol. RX7s were designed to use ethylene glycol. You don't want to use anything modern, any of these long-lasting, the pink or orange or red or anything like that. Just get the old-fashioned cheap ethylene glycol. I always get the concentrate because you're going to mix it with some deionized water. Now, with most vehicles, you do like a 50-50 mix, but with RX-7s, based on Mazda's recommendations, I believe it's a 70-30. 70% water and 30% coolant. And that's also why you always want to do it a little bit early, too, because you're going to have a higher water content, which means there's going to be less anti-corrosives in the system. Water does cool better than ethylene glycol, but that's why you want to change it early. I'm going to be changing to Evans, which is also ethylene glycol based. I don't know if the engine seals, the coolant O-rings are compatible with more modern coolants. That's why you just want to get this cheap stuff. And you know, this is honestly one of the cheapest maintenance items you can do on an RX-7, because this stuff is dirt cheap, and then the deionized water from your grocery store is like dirt cheap. So doesn't take long to do. The hardest part for me is jacking up the car, but this stuff is amazing. I'll do a video on this when I convert it to this. I still need to get a radiator for it, but if you haven't looked into Evans, I definitely recommend it. I'm running it in most of my cars, and like I mentioned, I'm going to be converting this pretty soon. Now that we got the coolant drained, I can replace the AST here. This is AST I got from Night Sports. Quite a few of these aftermarket. I think Our Magic carries them. REM. There's some local ones. I think Pettit used to make them. They might still make them. I'm not sure. But I picked this one up mainly just because it was about $50 or $60 cheaper than the REM one. And the Our Magic one's even more expensive. The only difference I can really tell between the REM one is it comes with a high pressure cap, which my cap's in good shape. It's a 0.9 bar. Pressure, but I'm not worried about that because I'm going to be going with Evans coolant and run a pressureless system, so it wasn't worth the extra $50 or $60 to get the other AST versus this one. They're virtually identical. This one has all the welded fittings. A couple of the other ones, I think the Our Magic and the REM one has bungs welded on, and then AN fittings or AN barbs essentially screwed in there. So this one, I mean, as long as it doesn't leak it, that's totally fine. So, but let's get this replaced. It's super easy. You got one bolt here and 3 hoses. You got one on the top, which you can see here, one on this side, and then one on the bottom. And then this peg actually fits into the bracket that's on the intercooler right there. So it's actually really easy to replace. Just make sure you drain your coolant first, otherwise it's just going to make a huge mess. But I'll get this put on. So here you have both of them side by side. You can see roughly, this is at a slightly different angle than the factory, but that shouldn't really matter. About the same height, a little bit lower too, but both have the peg down there. But now I don't have to worry about the old plastic one cracking. This one's probably been replaced. Whoever had this before did keep up on it pretty well. As you saw, I had a little bit of trouble getting these off because they had the factory clamps on there along with screw clamps, so obviously somebody's done something with it before, but I'm just going to keep the screw type clamps on there for right now. Let's install the new one in the reverse order. Knight Sports does provide this hardware pack. Let's see if we get it in focus. It comes with a couple hose clamps. I just reused the ones I have. I don't necessarily like these type here because they tend to cut into the hoses. The type that were already on there have the flat all the way around, so it's not going to cut into it with these little ribs. So I just reused those. It does have a nut and a bolt, so I can connect that through, since the factory AST actually has a zert in there, so you can screw it in. So you need to use these two. Luckily they do use 10 millimeters, so you can keep everything kind of standard. You won't have an oddball like 11 millimeter on there. Luckily these are 10 millimeter, well, 10 millimeter heads at least. That way you don't have to have some kind of oddball 11 or 13 or something on here. Well, the neighbor's house sounded like it just blew up. Something just got struck real close. I had to go check on it real quick, but it's one of the benefits of living in Tampa. It's supposed to be the lightning capital of North America or something. We have so many lightning strikes here and some really cool storms, but you get used to it. As long as you don't lose power, you're good. You don't want to lose power in the dead of heat in Florida. There we go, looks pretty good. That's your reservoir hose. This one's not under pressure. This one, once the pressure pushes past the cap, it flows that way into your overflow. So this one's never under pressure, but you do need to make sure it seals, because it needs to have a good seal in order for the system to cool down. It'll start drawing in, so you need to be able to hold vacuum so you can draw from the overflow. So the overflow fills up and it goes down depending on how hot the car is. And the last little touch is throw the cap on from my old AST. So it's in really good shape. It was a new one I put on 3 years ago, and when I convert to Evans, you just pull this seal off to make it pressureless. It still has to seal up here on the top, but this is how you make a system pressureless. When you run Evans, you do not have to run pressure, and I'd rather not run pressure, just because you have old parts that fail. Less likely to blow a hose off or rupture a hose or a plastic part. Now you do not have to take the battery out. I did just to make it easier. As you saw, I ran into the issue where whoever worked on it before, they kept these factory hose clamps on there along with the screw clamps. So in order to get my pliers in there easier, I just pulled the battery out. I already had the battery hold down and the cover off from pulling out the intercooler and cleaning up some stuff and doing some measurements for a project later. So it was just easy enough for me to lift out the battery, as you saw. It's really not that much work to pull a battery and make this whole job easier, but you see it's easy to replace AST. There's no performance gain. It's just a reliability item. Now, if you don't have one of these funnels and you plan on working on your own RX-7, you need to get one. These are a lifesaver, even not just for RX-7s. I've had this for over 20 years, and it's great for bleeding and burping all kinds of cars. This is the highest point in the RX-7, so theoretically all the bubbles should come to the top, but as you'll see with the burping process, we're going to have to burp it a little bit as it heat cycles. If you really have trouble burping an RX-7 or any car, usually I'll jack up just the front end, and that way it'll make it even higher. It helps get in the air out of the heater core and anything else that might be holding some air pockets. So I'll start with some distilled water, also known as deionized. So it's got no contaminants, just pure H2O.
Now that's what I call high quality H2O. Oh!
You'll see it burping. I finished up the rest of my items I wanted to work on with this. Now it's time to top off the coolant some more and start bleeding it. So I started off with the water. I haven't put any coolant in it yet. I drained not quite 2 gallons. It's like 1 3/4 of a gallon. So I'll put a full gallon of water in it and top the rest off with coolant. And that is going to be probably like a 60-40 or something close to that. So not quite the 70-30. I haven't had any overheating problems. But like I mentioned, I'm also going to be swapping over to Evans. So I may not want as much water content because I'm going to have to get everything out of the system when I swap over to Evans. You're not supposed to have any water in it whatsoever. So let me get this started and start bleeding it. So after you got it up to temperature, you get some pretty big burps. You get some splashing here and there, so I have to wipe it down. I'll hose it down after this. It's totally normal. I had some really big burps and it just kind of splashed everywhere. But this tells me that I'm pretty full and pretty well bled, because I poured a full gallon of water, and then this is the full gallon of antifreeze, and that's what's left in it. So that's about right. 1 3/4 gallons. That looks about right, and it'll actually come down a little bit. So what I'll do is now I'm going to leave this funnel in here like this until the engine cools all the way down to pretty much room temperature, and then I'll put the stopper in and dump the rest of this in the gallon, and then I'll check my overflow here. But that's tells me I have a pretty good bleed. That I did lose a little bit when it splashed around, but not a ton. So this looks about right to me. I should be good to go. Alright, we let it set overnight. I pulled off the funnel. It's topped off. One thing to point out is this cap here is your pressure cap. This cap here has no pressure valve. Some people get those mixed up and run into some cooling system issues. So this one here is just a sealer. Pressure cap goes there. It's pretty simple, but they do get mixed up. One thing you don't want to forget about is the overflow. I'm not going to worry about draining the overflow. A lot of times if you drain it the way I did, it'll actually suck from the overflow. But you always want to check the overflow level. If you haven't done your coolant in a long time or you're unsure, then I would definitely drain the overflow. Sometimes you got to remove the tank. And RX7s is kind of a pain, but in order to read it, you have this little dipstick thing. I already wiped this dry. I don't know if you can see this. On the stick, there you go, you actually have an F for full and L for low. That tells you how full this is. You can see I wiped it. It's not really, it's a little bit wet at the bottom, but it's really dry here. When you dip this in, you're going to see coolant will fill these little slots. So when you put it in here, drop it in there, pull it back out. Let's see if I can get this to focus on it again. There you go. Now you can see coolant fills all those, and that's kind of how you check that level. This is actually a little bit overfilled, which is fine. If it gets too much, it'll just pour out and on the ground, and just make sure that's where it's coming from. But this is a little bit overfilled. I've never had a problem with it pouring out, but it's also nice and green. It's not brown. I drained this when I imported the car, and so I know this fluid in here is still pretty good. That's how you check the fluid in your reservoir. Alright, just hosed off the engine bay and going to take it for a drive and make sure it doesn't overheat. See if we got any leaks or good to go. There we go, been driving around a little bit. Today's about 89 degrees in Florida, 100% humidity, so it's pretty warm. Car stays in between 85 and 90 degrees depending on when the AC is kicking on, but that's about what this car runs, and that's good. That's good safe range, especially for the heat of Florida. I can call this a success and be good. My cooling system's in good shape.